Bully's shocking attack on new girl exposed. Discover the incredible transformation of a hidden genius. Alice stepped into the fluorescent chaos of the high school gym, her heart pounding louder than the clamor of voices around her. The science fair loomed ahead like a mountain waiting to swallow her whole. She clutched her project, her app designed to combat bullying, like a lifeline. She knew what she wanted, to make a statement, but the shadows of doubt clung to her. Would anyone care about her innovative work, or was she just a nerd seeking validation in a sea of doubt and judgment? As she scanned the crowd, her gaze landed on Sarah, the queen of the school, flanked by her entourage, giggling, trash-talking clones ready to assert their dominance. Alice's stomach twisted at the thought of facing them. In the small Midwestern town, where cliques dictated social hierarchies, Alice was a nobody. The whispers followed her through the halls, each one a strand tightening around her throat, rallying her insecurities like a noose. How had this all unraveled so quickly? She was simply trying to navigate high school, the supposed pinnacle of adolescence, yet it felt more like a battleground where every step was a potential setback. Just the day before, Sarah had orchestrated a humiliation that left a gaping wound on Alice's confidence. "What's the point of your little app, Alice? You think it'll actually work? Good luck trying to save your pathetic self." It echoed in her mind, each word laced with venom. The pressure mounted. Should she respond with clever comebacks or let her coding speak for her? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The moment Alice's name was called for her presentation, her knees wobbled, fighting a battle against the thrumming hope that flickered within her. This app was not just a project, it was her voice, her chance to make a difference. But as she plugged in her laptop and faced the audience, the moment crystallized into blinding fear. Sarah's laugh cut through the noise. "What are you trying to prove, nerd? No one cares about your stupid ideas." The laughter felt like 1,000 needles, and Alice stood frozen, the audience's eyes flickering between her and Sarah's disapproving smirk. Beneath the humiliation, Alice felt the weight of her father's sacrifices urging her onward. Could she rise above the pressure? Both vulnerability and anger swelled within her, a chaotic symphony of emotions warring for dominance.
Should she confront Sarah with defiance, or should she continue working in silence as a hidden genius? Doubt tangled with a fierce desire for justice within her. Could she harness her pain into something transformative? As the tension rose, a flicker of hope ignited within her soul. But just as she was breathing courage into her spirit, an anonymous tip slipped into her inbox, revealing a secret about Sarah's struggles, a chink in the armor of her bully. The information felt like both a gift and a burden, igniting a storm of conflicting emotions inside her. Alice held the power to expose Sarah, yet another part of her understood that compassion could hold more strength. As she stood on the precipice of a moral dilemma, Alice felt her heart race harder than ever. The world around her spun wildly, creating an urge to act, and yet she hesitated. Would unleashing her app serve as a weapon, or would it become a bridge for compassion? The ultimate choice loomed, darker than her worst fears. What path would she follow? A road to revenge, or a chance for understanding? Alice's mind raced as she contemplated her next move. The gym buzzed with energy, students milling around like excited bees. Each passing moment felt like a countdown, the weight of decision pressing heavily on her chest. Could this newfound information about Sarah really change anything? The thrill of potential revenge whispered sweetly to her, urging her to act on instinct. Yet beneath the temptation to retaliate, she sensed an unsettling truth. Bullying was more than a personal affront. It was a complex web of insecurities, often rooted in fear and self-doubt. Sarah's confidence was merely a facade, a shield against perhaps her own vulnerabilities. Alice had built her app to champion empathy and understanding, to create a safer environment, not to embody the very cruelty she sought to eliminate. Armed with this realization, she took a deep breath, steadying her thoughts. The anxious noise of the gym faded as she focused on her purpose. Presenting her project was meant to forge connections and foster change, not to fuel animosity. If she allowed herself to engage in revenge, she would only add to the cycle of hate that had already ensnared her. The pivotal moment arrived when her nerves gave way to determination. The mic crackled in her hand, and she could feel the audience's gaze firmly upon her. It was time to share her truth. The app wasn't just a tool, it was a reflection of her essence. With a burst of courage, she began speaking, her voice stronger than she had anticipated. "This app is a way for us to understand each other," Alice started, her eyes scanning the room. "It's not only a response to bullying, but also an opportunity to reach out and support one another. We are all human, grappling with our own challenges. In order to create a better environment, we need to have compassion."
As she explained its features, educational resources for bystanders, anonymous reporting systems, and social support channels, she felt an unexpected warmth in her chest. The energy in the room shifted. A few heads nodded in understanding. This was what she wanted all along, not just to stand up for herself, but to connect with others who perhaps felt isolated, just as she did. Then came the moment she feared the most, addressing Sarah directly. "I know we all have our struggles, and I have seen how pressure can shape us. I hope we can all choose kindness over cruelty." Silence enveloped the gym, and for a brief moment, Alice could see Sarah's facade crack, betraying a glimpse of the hurt beneath. Yet, as her heart swelled with hope, her resolve shuddered. The vulnerability visible on Sarah's face stirred a hidden fear inside Alice. Perhaps in seeking to uplift others, she had opened herself to possible repercussions. Would Sarah lash out in wrath, or respond with wounded pride? Doubt pricked at her mind like an unresolved itch. As applause broke out, it was mixed with whispers and glances toward Sarah. Alice felt the exhilaration of presenting her work, but also the storm clouds gathering above her. The real battles were far from over. She had sparked something, yes, but would it withstand the backlash from a bully bringing the weight of the social order to bear down on her? With conflicting emotions swirling within her, Alice stepped down from the stage, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. A decision had to be made, not about revenge or silence, but about how to navigate the complexities now inherent in her life. The journey toward understanding was just beginning, and with it came a new wave of challenges. As she exited the gym, determination began to take root within her. She would confront the new realities ahead, ready to push against the currents of fear, doubt, and condemnation. But first, she needed to devise a strategy, a way to guard not only her heart, but also the purpose behind her app. Faced with the shadows of doubt creeping back in, what choice would she make that would define her next steps towards empowerment? Would she find the strength necessary to confront not only Sarah, but also the deeper issues of her own insecurities? The answers awaited her, veiled in uncertainty, as she stepped into a hall that felt both familiar and foreign. Alice paused in the hall, her heart racing. The cacophony of chatter swirled around her, but she felt isolated, suspended in a moment that felt like a lingering heartbeat. She couldn't shake the image of Sarah's fleeting vulnerability away from her mind. Facing her feelings about bullying wasn't just a challenge, it was a call to confront the ghosts of her past. What would her next action be? Would she retreat into the safety of her ideas, the app she had poured her soul into, or would she dive deeper into the complexities of human emotion and connection? The potential for confrontation loomed heavily. She peered down the hall, where clusters of students were huddled together, exchanging thoughts, likely dissecting her presentation as if it was a spectacle. Each hushed tone echoed her insecurities, igniting a flicker of doubt that had her questioning if she was ready for the reality of her initiative. She knew that the road ahead was paved with uncertainty. Her app was indeed a reflection of her essence, a mission to provide empathy and understanding, but it wasn't just about her feelings. She had ignited a spark with her presentation, and now she needed to cultivate that fire without allowing fear to suffocate it. Compromise was not an option. She had to stay authentic to her vision. Steeling herself, Alice headed to the quiet courtyard just outside the main building. The sun warmed her skin, its light acting as a reminder of the hope she now needed to hold on to. She took a deep breath, her mind racing with strategies to channel the energy she had created. Perhaps now was the time to reach out, not just to her peers, but potentially to Sarah. It was a radical thought, but sometimes reaching a hand out meant taking a risk worth the potential outcomes. What if she invited Sarah to a conversation? They could talk about the struggles they faced, hers stemming from her work on the app, and Sarah's arising from whatever darkness fed her need to exert power over others. Alice had not yet identified the fear, but she was determined to understand it, to use it as a stepping stone towards something greater. Determination welled up within her. Sarah's past behavior was steeped in the complexity of adolescence, and maybe it was time to challenge the perceptions she held. She recalled her own battles with self-doubt, the feelings of inferiority that stifled her voice for too long. Confronting Sarah would mean facing the very fear that had crippled her for so long, the fear of judgment, of rejection, and of being misunderstood. Alice wanted her app to be a bridge, not a weapon. The urgency to act pushed her forward. She grabbed her phone, fingers dancing over the screen as she drafted a message. "Sarah, can we talk? I think we have more in common than we realize." She hesitated, breath caught in her throat before hitting send. What would the outcome be? Sarah could easily dismiss or lash out in response, but she had stepped into the light of vulnerability, and that move had to count for something. The immediate silence in her mind was deafening, followed by an avalanche of anxiety. What if this attempt backfired? There was no turning back now. She had resolved to break the cycle of negativity, to begin a dialogue focused on growth, not animosity. In doing so, she might just confront her own insecurities in the process. The promise of transformation hung in the air, an enigmatic force waiting to be manifested. Little did she know, this decision would alter more than her relationship with Sarah.
With her heart pounding and nerves tingling, Alice knew she stood on the precipice of something profound. Would she emerge stronger from this trial, or would she falter beneath the weight of her own ambition? Only time would tell. As dusk descended, an unsettling calm cloaked the courtyard. The darkness of doubt crept back in, whispering fears of failure in her ear. But this was also an invitation, a chance to redefine who she was in this new chapter of her life. Would she be able to remain true to her mission, or would personal conflict derail her journey? The answers loomed just ahead, tantalizingly out of reach, promising to challenge her resolve further. Alice sat cross-legged on the sun-warmed grass of the courtyard, her phone resting in her palm like a stone. She replayed the moment of sending the message to Sarah, a rush of courage slipping through her fingers as doubt filled the void. The tension between wanting to foster understanding and fearing rejection throbbed in her chest. What if Sarah didn't respond? What if her attempt to connect worsened things between them? The urgent buzz of notifications pulled Alice from her spiraling thoughts. Her heart quickened when she saw Sarah's name on the screen, the simplicity of it, a name that could unlock a complex web of emotions. With a deep breath, she opened the message. "Meeting you in the library after school. Let's talk." The directness of the reply both thrilled and terrified her. Alice's thoughts raced. She was about to face the embodiment of her greatest fears, yet there was a flicker of hope intertwined with her anxiety. This could be an opportunity for both of them to grow, to unravel and understand the layers of their shared struggles. As the final bell rang, Alice shuffled down the hallway, her footsteps echoing against the struck walls. The school felt like a maze, each turn amplifying her doubts. What could she say? Words felt inadequate to convey the urgency of the conversation. Her heart urged her toward authenticity while her mind screamed caution. When she entered the library, the scent of old books wrapped around her, providing a calming backdrop. She spotted Sarah at a table toward the back, the glow from the window catching the sharp angles of her face. There was an unmistakable air of tension, a standoff of sorts, but the flicker of vulnerability in Sarah's eyes hinted at something deeper. "Hey," Alice said, approaching the table with hesitant resolve. "Hey," Sarah replied, her voice flat but inviting. Alice sat across from her, the distance between them both literal and metaphorical. "Thanks for agreeing to meet." A pause ensued, heavy with unspoken thoughts, as each moment stretched into an eternity. Alice's palms grew clammy, and the urge to retreat reared its head. Yet the mission behind her app beckoned her forward. Fueled by that purpose, she initiated the conversation. "I wanted to talk about everything. What's been happening," she began, her voice steadying as she leaned in, "and the bullying that's been a part of our lives." Sarah's expression shifted slightly, the corners of her mouth tightening. "You think I'm the only problem here?" "No," Alice clarified quickly. "It's not just that, but I believe we both have our battles. I see that you're struggling too." She had not expected to feel this urgency within herself, a need to convey empathy towards someone she had deemed an enemy only weeks prior. Sarah's gaze dropped to the table, fingers drumming lightly against the surface. "Everyone sees things in black and white. I'm the bully, aren't I?" "No," Alice replied, her voice firm yet gentle. "You're more than just that. I've been afraid to reach out before, but I realize that a lot of where we are comes from our own insecurities." The silence that hung in the air seemed to crack open a space for both of them, releasing the tension and fear that had kept them apart. For the first time, Alice felt the wall separating them begin to dissolve. "What do you know about insecurity?" Sarah muttered, her tone shifting to a mix of challenge and curiosity. "I know what it's like to feel unwanted," Alice said, a swell of vulnerability bubbling to the surface. "I used to think if I hid behind my ideas, maybe no one would see my failures. But now," she took a breath, summoning her resolve, "I want to change that dynamic, not just for us, but for everyone." Sarah's brow furrowed, the conflict within her becoming palpable. "Changing? Is that really possible?" In that moment, the power of shared vulnerability settled over the table. Silence lived around them, but Alice knew she needed to push further. She had stirred the conversation, so she had to navigate it with equal parts hope and strength. "I believe it is," she said with newfound confidence, a mantra stirring within her. "Let's help each other." As she spoke, Alice was astounded by the clarity forming around her own motivations. It was more than just a conversation. This was a chance for her to redefine her purpose and maybe even help someone else walk a different path. However, the ache of potential backlash loomed large, and Alice could feel it tightening around her throat. Sarah looked contemplative, her defenses beginning to waver. "What if I fail?" Alice recognized the weight in those words. Fear echoed between them. "Then we try again. Together. We'll figure this out." This moment had the potential to fracture the cycle that had confined them, but just as their defense mechanisms began to crack, the stubborn weight of their history lingered stubbornly in the air. Alice feared the delicate bonds of connection could splinter at any moment. Would they emerge as allies, or allow their pasts to dictate their futures? The answer drifted just out of reach, fraught with uncertainty, but the conversation had been ignited, a spark that could engulf them both.
What awaited them next could either bind them in solidarity or tear them apart. As the weight of the truth settled around them, Alice felt the pulse of transformation beat louder, insisting she steer the ship even amid turbulent waters. Alice pressed her palms against the table, a gesture meant to ground herself in the unfolding moment. She could feel Sarah's eyes probing her, searching for anything that could confirm her suspicions that this conversation was yet another manipulation. Yet Alice had chosen to step beyond that hesitation. There was a new resolve taking seed within her. "Listen," she said, gathering her thoughts into a more cohesive force. "I'm tired of being afraid. I think you're tired too. Wouldn't it be better to channel that energy into something meaningful?" Sarah's brows knitted together, eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly. "And what do you propose? Just pretend that everything is fine?" "Not pretend," Alice insisted, feeling the heat of her convictions burn brightly. "Confront it, acknowledge it, use it as a catalyst for change. You and we've both been caught in this cycle." She could feel her words resonating, but the familiar walls were still heavily fortified around Sarah. "You really think we can just change? That it's that simple?" The challenge poked at something inside Alice, igniting an ember of frustration and determination. "It starts with a choice, right here, right now. We have to lay bare our fears, instead of letting those fears dictate our actions. You're not just a bully, you're a person with battles, and I want to understand those battles." The tension in the library shifted, the air thickening as Sarah contemplated Alice's declaration. She fiddled with her hair, a nervous habit, her shoulders withdrawing inward, but Alice held her gaze steady. Alice took a deep breath, drawing on what few strategies she had cultivated within her own battles of insecurity. "It's okay if you don't know where to begin. Just share what you're comfortable with. I'm here to listen." Sarah's hesitance melted into frustration, her expression furiously torn between vulnerability and anger, the storm within her swirling. "You think it's only me?" The question emerged almost like a challenge, laced with years of buried pain and anger. "No, I don't," Alice replied slowly. "But you're the one in front of me now. Look, I've fought my own battles with being singled out and feeling worthless. The fear of letting anyone see you, it's suffocating. I'm unwaveringly certain you felt it too." "Fine then," Sarah spat, her voice breaking slightly. "You want to understand? You want transparency? I've been angry because I feel alone, a little lost. Being tough is the only armor I thought I had." Her defenses crumbled another notch, revealing her exposed vulnerability. "What if we could turn that anger into something powerful?" Alice suggested, her heart racing as she edged closer to the revelation of an unlikely alliance.
A chance to redefine ourselves, not just enemies, but allies standing against everything else. The dramatic shift in their dialogue hung heavy in the air, a crack forming in the rigid structures they had both built up. Each word dripped with the raw potential of transformation that glimmered tantalizingly close, yet precarious in its uncertainty. "What if I fail at that too?" Sarah asked again, a whisper now, betraying the fragility behind her hardened exterior. Alice leaned forward, driven by an authentic desire to connect. "What if I fail? What if we both do? But what's the alternative? Staying trapped in the cycle? Continuing the hurt? I don't want to live like that anymore. and I bet deep down neither do you." The room fell silent, saturated with possibility. Alice's heart raced as Sarah's mask began to crack further. A shared realization sparked in that stillness. Something was unraveling between them, and it was terrifyingly beautiful. Finally, Sarah's gaze softened, framed by a perplexing mixture of apprehension and curiosity. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we could try." Alice felt her body tense and release, an invisible weight lifting even as new anxieties crept up her spine. This was a leap into the unknown, but it pulsed with the potential for redemption. They could rewrite their stories. "What's the first step?" Sarah asked. Alice's mind raced. "Let's start by confronting the ones who bully us, together. We bring this conversation into the light. We expose the absurdity of what we've let ourselves become." A flicker of an idea ignited as she felt Sarah's determination flourish across the table. They were standing at the precipice, poised for something transformative. But unbeknownst to them, in the hallways echoing outside the library door, a tide of animosity stirred. Those who thrived on their conflict were watching. What would happen when the others found out about this nascent alliance? Alice's stomach churned with unease, realization dawning. They might be stepping into danger far greater than either had anticipated. As the weight of their decision settled between them, Alice couldn't shake the feeling that they were embarking on a path fraught with unforeseen consequences. Would their vulnerability invite connection, or unleash something darker? The echoes of heartbeats competed with the distant sounds of laughter and hostility outside, reminding them both of the battles they were about to wage. The moment felt electric, but it raised the terrifying question. How far were they really willing to go to confront the shadows of themselves and each other? Alice stood at the threshold of a monumental shift, her heart pounding in rhythm with the epiphanies unfolding before her. The once impenetrable walls between herself and Sarah had been pierced, but they had merely exchanged one set of problems for another.
As she exchanged a glance with Sarah, Alice pondered whether they had either the strength or the courage to navigate the terrain of vulnerability and face the oncoming storm together. "Are you ready for this?" Sarah asked, her voice barely more than a whisper, yet laced with the steely determination Alice had glimpsed earlier. "More than ever," Alice affirmed, grappling with a swell of conflicting emotions. Excitement coursed through her, a sense of power, yet it was underscored by a dread that tugged at her dat. It was one thing to discuss change, another to act upon it. They took a deep breath in unison, a silent pact forged in that stillness. Alice could sense that the path ahead wasn't just theirs, but also belonged to the shadows they had both avoided for so long. Today, they would confront not only their foes, but also their intertwined fears. As they stepped out into the bustling hall, Alice's confidence wavered momentarily. The energy in the atmosphere shifted, a tide of hostility lurking just beneath the surface. The laughter she once found comfort in now sounded mocking, the echo of her own insecurities reverberating through her thoughts. She glanced at familiar faces, some filled with contempt, others shock, and a rare few laced with curiosity. "Let's do this," Alice squeezed out, fighting the instinct to retreat. They proceeded to the cluster of students who thrived on discord, where the tension coiled tightly in the air. The glare of unfriendly gazes reflected Alice's worst fears, but she urged herself to recall her resolve. Her thoughts skimmed back to that moment in the library, the fear of change countered by the hope of transformation. The duality ignited within her, pushing her forward. "Hey!" Alice's voice, surprisingly steady, cut through the hum of whispers. Immediately, heads turned, eyes trained on her as if she were an outlier daring to disrupt their status quo. Sarah stood by her side, equally emboldened. "We need to talk to you all about this ongoing cycle of hate." A ripple of confusion passed through the group. The energy was tense, with anticipation crackling, but uncertainty lingered, gnawing at erstwhile alliances. Alice caught a disdainful sneer from Ellie, a notorious perpetrator of their torment, masking fear with bravado. The confrontation would be a test of their fortitude and newfound friendship. "Who died and made you the queen of morality?" Ellie quipped, voice dripping with derision. The snickers that followed pricked at Alice's skin, igniting a rogue warmth that threatened her composure. "We're tired of playing the roles you assign us," Sarah interjected, voice rising. "You think belittling us makes you strong? It just exposes how weak you truly are." Alice sensed Sarah's passion echo despite the tense atmosphere. A flicker of respect momentarily passed between them, bridging their vulnerability with newfound strength. It was invigorating.
She felt grounded as if in that instant they could transform their isolation into an alliance against the very source of their suffering. However, before she could ride the wave of encouragement, a sharp interjection cut through the air. Jared, Ellie's staunch ally, stepped forward, flexing precisely the power dynamic they sought to challenge. "And what do you think will happen? Do you really believe that confronting us will change anything?" A heavy silence settled as Alice grappled with the weight of their expectations. She locked eyes with Sarah, and they shared a moment of silent reassurance. "Yes," Alice said firmly, drawing strength from the vulnerability they'd cultivated. "We believe it can. The times are changing, and so are we." With those words, an explosive feeling hung between them, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The confrontation, she realized, was only the beginning of a narrative neither had dared to brave before. "Gather your crew," Alice commanded, her tone surging within her. "Face us with your truth." The challenge left the hallway charged. Even middle ground seemed tempted to decide. Yet she understood that it wasn't just a test of wills, it was a confrontation of identities. As eyes bore into them, the familiar dread whispered again in Alice's mind. What will they think? What if this goes wrong? The pressure was palpable, forcing her to confront her own judgments. Sarah nudged her lightly, grounding her again. This moment was metamorphosizing into something more profound, a mirror reflecting their inner battles. Together, they were defying their narratives. But even as the potential for change crackled in the air, Alice could sense that not everyone would choose empathy over hatred. Glances swept the hall more viciously, opponents sharpening their responses like blades edged for a fight. Could their confrontation spark a transformation, or would it unleash an even darker wave of retaliation? With the lid off their fears, Alice braced for the challenges to come. The stakes felt higher than they had anticipated, as they prepared for a clash that would test everything they had begun to build. Would their newfound alliance thrive in the face of hostility, or would the daunting shadows prove too formidable? Alice's resolve transformed into a palpable energy, driving her forward despite the chaotic tide of emotions swirling around. She had crossed a line, emerging as an unexpected force, but the reality of what lay ahead began to register in her mind. The whispers around them rippled with condescension, and she instinctively braced herself for the backlash that was sure to follow. As Ellie observed, her sneer sharpened. The tension felt dangerously thick. She could almost taste the animosity on the air. Jared leaned against the wall, arms crossed, a fortress of silence and menace, while the rest of the spectators awaited bloodshed. Alice's heart raced.
The moment had arrived for her to embrace the change she had vocalized, but how deep did her conviction run? "Are you two really prepared for this?" Jared's voice slithered through the crowd, dripping with sarcasm. "You think this little display will magically alter our behavior?" The challenge lingered. In one swift glance, Alice recognized her strategic position. She was not alone. "We might not change you overnight," she countered, lowering her guard but keeping her tone steady. "But it's about time someone spoke up. This cycle of cruelty stops here." The energy in the hallway shifted subtly. For every scoff from the back, there were eyes reflecting doubt and curiosity, students who were tired of being bystanders, uncertain of their roles. Who were they, really? Participants in this dance of cruelty, or merely observers too afraid to step outside the shadows? "Doubt all you want," Sarah piped up, a newfound confidence sparkling in her voice. "But what have we got to lose? The way things are isn't working for anybody." The room held its breath, caught in a tableau of unexpected defiance. Alice could feel herself expanding within. She had taken a risk, boldly declaring her stance, and it unleashed a reservoir of strength that surprised even her. This was new territory, deliberately confronting adversaries instead of shrinking away. Jared stepped forward, his body language oozing aggression as he cast a glare toward Sarah. "And you? You think you're some kind of savior?" he spat. "You're just bringing more eyes on yourselves, more targets." As the weight of that threat hung dangerously between them, Alice wrestled with the implications. She had never thought of herself as a martyr, nor did she intend to be one. What could they shape their identities into during this reckoning? It felt like an exhilarating gamble, but it was one where the stakes were astonishingly high. Rising to the challenge, Alice responded. "Maybe we are targets, but being a target means standing for something." The courage surged within her, igniting a fierce pride, one that transcended fear. "You're threatened by our willingness to change, and that should tell you something." The room erupted into murmurs, some filled with support, others dripping with disdain. Yet, within the cacophony, Alice detected a shift. Those glimmers of empathy started to emerge from among the hostile crowd. Perhaps she wasn't just playing a role, she was unlocking doors within others, offering a more honest exploration of who they could become. Yet, with each moment alive with possibility, insecurity lurked at the fringes of her mind. What if this didn't work? The fleeting sense of empowerment was intoxicating, but fragile. She knew all too well how swiftly triumph could turn to despair. In a flash, Ellie pushed through the gathering, a looming storm threatening to disrupt the fragile balance they had begun to build. "You talk a big game, Alice. Are you really ready to face what comes next?"
"You don't have what it takes." Alice stood her ground, her pulse thundering in her ears. Internal voices screamed for her to retreat, to protect herself, yet something far more compelling anchored her feet in place. She had already stepped into the unknown. Turning back now would mean relinquishing everything she fought for. "Let's find out," Alice declared, her voice cutting through the noise, resonating with an intensity she hadn't conjured before. With those words spoken, a new journey unfolded. A confrontation with the familiar demons awaited, not just from others, but from within herself. With the battle lines drawn, Alice could feel the upcoming storm, and she wondered if they were ready to withstand it. As Ellie's eyes narrowed, Alice braced herself for the impending backlash, propelling her into uncharted territories of resilience. Would she find strength in this treacherous confrontation, or would she discover vulnerabilities she hadn't yet acknowledged? The moment hung in the balance, and Alice needed to decide. How far was she willing to go to protect her newfound self? Alice could feel the weight of the moment pressing down upon her, amplifying the deafening silence that hung in the air. The murmurings stilled as eyes focused on her, and she realized that this was not just a battle against Ellie or Jared. It was a confrontation with her own insecurities, her own identity. She had stepped into the light, but the shadows were still threatening to consume her. As Ellie smirked defiantly, Alice went through a rapid mental checklist. The stakes were alarmingly high. How would she hold on to the courage she had summoned? Would it evaporate the moment harsh words sliced through the air? The reality of her situation was stark. She needed to be more than just a voice against bullying. She had to embody the change she wanted to see. "Go ahead, give it your best shot," she dared, though inside a tremor of uncertainty coursed through her. She could sense the collective intake of breath from those watching, their tension mirroring her own. The moment was electric, their collective tension palpable. For every glimmer of support, there was a remaining doubt that weighed heavily on her spirit. It dawned on Alice that transformation wasn't merely in the announcement of defiance. It had to be sustained through perseverance, a daily commitment to redefine who she intended to be in this hostile environment. "Why us, Alice?" a voice rang out from the crowd, breaking the silence. It was a familiar face, a freshman who had always kept to the background, too shy to engage. Why would we risk ourselves for this? The question echoed in Alice's mind. Were they not all risking something by remaining passive? But it also sparked something within her. Because every small act of courage matters. Each time we stand up, we expand the space in which we can thrive. Her voice quaked slightly, but she integrated every ounce of confidence she could muster. Alice locked eyes with Sarah, who was nodding with understanding. Together, they exchanged a look that solidified an unspoken bond. They could rise above the discomfort, transform the fear into an unwavering commitment to authenticity. They could be the vanguard of a movement that went beyond just confronting bullies. It could redefine how they saw themselves. Ellie, unappeased, retorted, "So you want to be heroes now? You don't have the looks, the popularity, or even the guts to face what's coming. You're only digging your grave deeper, you know." Alice understood now. Under the layers of hostility, Ellie lived in shadows of her own insecurities. This confrontation was not only between them, but also a competition of vulnerabilities. How could Alice navigate this tumultuous maze filled with doubts and fears, not just for herself, but for the others who had begun to stand alongside her? Jared took a menacing step forward. "You really think that's enough? Disrupting what we've built? You'll only toy around with the worst of us." There was a flicker of something unsettling in his eyes, a mix of threat and uncertainty. Alice leaned into that energy, deciphering it as an opportunity. "Or maybe we can create something better together," she said, feeling her resolve strengthen in defiance of his glare. Each word dripped with the truth of her vision. This journey was about transformation,
not just personal, but collective, and she was at its helm, even if the waters were rough and turbulent. Yet beneath that veneer of strength, Alice felt the tremors of doubt quaking in her core. What if she faltered when the tide ebbed? Was she really prepared for what was to come? Through the cracks of her own integrity, she sensed the anticipation building, a rising storm that reflected her tumultuous emotions. As Ellie's jaw clenched and her stance shifted, Alice braced for the next escalation, the next confrontation. What would she discover about herself when pushed to the edge? Would she uncover a deeper well of courage, or face her own limitations? The question pressed in on her, insatiable and cruel. Behind her, a new resolve began to shift in the others. Was this the moment they could define themselves, not just as spectators, but as participants in their own narratives? Alice felt emboldened, like she was lighting sparks around her, waiting to ignite. The crossroads loomed, and Alice was keenly aware that each step forward would demand more than she bargained for. What awaited her beneath the surface? Only the impending confrontation would reveal the truth of her own metamorphosis, and she was poised to uncover just how much she was willing to endure in this brave new path. As the air vibrated with tension, the question lingered. Would the force of their burgeoning unity overpower the toxicity that threatened to suffocate their voices? The storm was upon them, but Alice was determined to stand firm amid the chaos.
Alice felt the atmosphere shift, an almost tangible wave of energy flowing through the crowd, as their gazes alternated between her and her antagonists. Each moment seemed suspended in time, an eternity where she grappled with the enormity of her choices. This wasn't merely about defending herself, it was about reshaping the narrative that had chained so many to silence. Ellie's contempt simmered dangerously beneath the surface, and Alice recognized it for what it was, a manifestation of fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being exposed. "You really think you can change things here, that your little speech will matter?" Ellie spat, her voice dripping with cynicism. The confidence Alice had summoned felt both exhilarating and terrifying. It paled against the specter of doubt that lingered at the edges of her consciousness. Every second of silence from the crowd was an echo of her insecurities, but the core of her determination burned brighter with each heartbeat. How could she translate this moment into something significant? Drawing in a deep breath, Alice allowed herself to meet Jared's piercing gaze. "You don't own this place. None of us do. We all belong here," she declared. The statement had a richness to it, a call to assertiveness that was no longer merely impulsive, but grounded. With those words, she stood not just for herself, but for every individual who felt invisible or voiceless. The reaction was immediate. Alice noticed the freshman who had questioned her earlier, nudging his friend in solidarity. Others began to shift, eyes widening, whispers of encouragement merging into the air. Perhaps her words were strikes against the canvas of fear and resignation, each one a brushstroke toward something new. But then Jared shrugged, attempting to downplay her effort. "You're naive if you think this will change anything. Real life isn't about feelings, it's about power." His indifference cut deep, stirring a painful realization inside Alice. Did she too carry a flicker of that same power mentality, veiled beneath her hope for change? Before she could dwell on that thought, a sudden shout erupted from behind her. "Stop pretending you're something you're not." It was Sarah, her voice unwavering against the tide of hostility. For a brief moment, the gesture caught Alice off guard. It was an echo of solidarity and strength, something she desperately needed. "Exactly," Alice seized the moment, bolstering her confidence. "When we embrace who we actually are, we defy those who want to keep us in darkness." She could see it now, a shift rooting deeper. Others were nodding, some crossing their arms in defense of her burgeoning call for authenticity. Still, the storm within her raged. Could she leverage this new resolve to challenge the very core of their fears? Each interaction required a level of vulnerability, a willingness to show her own scars.
Was she willing to admit that these insecurities were an integral part of her journey, not just hindrances? As the intensity mounted, Alice's thoughts began to crystallize. The insights she gleaned in this defining moment felt profound and relevant. Perhaps revealing her own flaws could foster genuine connections with those around her. Perhaps the raw human condition wasn't a weakness, but a strength waiting to be recognized. But Allie was relentless, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. "You think sharing your miseries will sway us? We want real leaders, not emotional wrecks." The words were weapons, designed to cut, but Alice wouldn't back down. Then let's become better leaders together. We're all a work in progress, she shot back, her voice steady. As laughter echoed in the background from those still enthralled her apathy, Alice felt an undeniable urge to navigate this labyrinth further. The stakes were higher than she ever imagined, and with each stance, every word delivered, she was sculpting a new version of herself. Despite the tremors of fear that still lurked in her thoughts, she began to recognize the power that lay in authenticity. In the brewing chaos of the confrontation, would her newfound clarity propel her into further self-discovery, or would it leave her exposed and vulnerable? As the crowd around her murmured with anticipation and uncertainty, Alice steeled herself for what was to come. Her mind raced with possibilities. Each breath she took was not just a defense, but an opportunity. Would she stand steadfast, or would the winds of discord knock her down? The moment had arrived for Alice to define herself, not just against the antagonists, but through her own lens, redirecting her purpose into focus for everyone who listened. What awaited her beyond this storm? Only the heat of conflict could strip down her facade completely, revealing the intricate layers of who she could truly become. Alice stood at the center of the tumultuous crowd, anxiety swirling within her, yet bolstered by a newfound solidarity with Sarah. This was it, the moment she had prepared for, the culmination of her growth and resilience. As she faced Jared and Ellie, she could feel the shift in energy, a collective breath taken by those who had grown tired of being bystanders to their own narratives. With every heartbeat echoing in her ears, Alice spoke again, this time with unwavering conviction. We are done relinquishing our power to fear. This bullying, this ridicule, it has no rightful place in our lives. We can either choose to perpetuate hate or stand together against it. Choose to be better. A charged silence settled over the group, punctuated only by the cautious murmurs of support brewing in the corners of the room. Alice caught glimpses of familiar faces, students who had once shied away from confrontation, now giving her their attention, their curiosity piqued. With her heart racing, she pressed on, her voice steady.
Every moment we allow these toxic behaviors to persist is another moment we entrap ourselves in the oppression of our own identities. We're not just defending each other, we're claiming our right to exist authentically. Bullying is a choice, but so is compassion. The clarity in her speech radiated through the air, a beacon of resilience basking in the light of her determination. Ellie shifted uncomfortably, the smirk replaced with uncertainty, as if Alice's words were uncovering layers of herself she'd tried hard to bury. "What do you expect from us? That we'll change overnight?" she retorted, but the venom in her voice wavered. "No," Alice asserted, "but I believe we can start by each acknowledging our struggles. We all have scars. We've harbored fears that manifest in ways we don't even recognize. It's time to confront those fears and choose accountability over blind animosity." Jared's expression hardened, but Alice pressed on, feeling the warmth of solidarity enveloping her like a shield. She caught Sarah's eye, and they exchanged an empowering nod of encouragement, an unspoken promise that they would navigate this road together. In that heartbeat, Alice sensed their shift from opposition to opportunity. Every act of kindness, every decision to uplift rather than hurt, contributes to the tapestry of this school. We can begin rewriting our story today. Join us, and we can uplift not only our voices, but the voices of those who remain unheard. Whispers of affirmation rippled through the now engaged crowd, as some students took tentative steps forward, intrigued by the possibility of a different dynamic. It was as though Alice's words had cracked the surface, allowing her peers to glimpse the potential of their collective power. Yet tension still loomed, and in the back of her mind, doubts wrestled back to the surface. Would they really come together, or would her hope be misdirected? The lingering shadows of skepticism lingered painfully in her gut. Standing before her peers, many who once led the charge against her, was both vulnerable and terrifying. "Choose this path with us," she implored, her assertiveness augmenting. "Let's dismantle this mentality. We can uphold one another, and in doing so, reclaim our identities. In unity, we grow stronger." As murmurs grew louder, Alice could see the fabric of narratives beginning to lift. One by one, members of the crowd began to take steps forward. Alice felt the shift unexpectedly ignite hope within her heart.
This era of confrontation could breed transformation. Jared stepped closer, an unexpected softness piercing his usual bravado. "What if you fail?" he whispered, the challenge softened by an underlying thread of curiosity. Alice took a deep breath, recalling her own transformation. Failure is just a stepping stone. What truly matters is that we try. We owe it to ourselves to at least have a conversation, a chance to reshape our relationships outside these walls.
With those words, she witnessed a small flicker of connection forming between her former adversaries. The unease mingled with an emerging sense of camaraderie as some of the other students shared their stories, their own hidden battles against insecurity and fear. Time suspended as Alice realized she was not alone in this journey. They were all grappling with the same fundamental truths, the same burdens imposed by the societal pressures of adolescence. And this newfound alliance could break through the tarnished barriers. In that electric moment, Alice felt an overwhelming sense of pride. She had stepped out of the shadows of doubt to confront the systemic issues of bullying, and in turn had lit a path for her classmates to find their own voices. They achieved collective power born from shared vulnerability. The confrontation had transformed into a movement, one that spoke of compassion, resilience, and the undeniable truth that they were not defined by their painful histories, but by the potential of their future selves. They were reborn into champions of understanding, eager to uplift one another through this evolving script of togetherness. As applause began to ripple through the crowd, Alice could feel her heart swell. The history she dreaded had blossomed into an opportunity for renewal, a revival of purpose cemented in hope. This was her achievement, not merely standing up to bullies, but fostering a culture of empathy. Stepping away from fear and into the light of collective identity, Alice emerged confident and resolute. The lines between enemy and ally had blurred, blossoming into something beautiful. The journey was always ongoing, one of transformation and self-discovery, but she had proven that even the deepest divides could be bridged with understanding. Alice's voice emerged as a clarion call for change, resonating with sincerity and authenticity. She stood before her peers, not as a victim but as a pioneer, forging new paths toward healing and mutual respect. And as she stood there, embraced by the warmth of a new coalition against hostility, she realized her mission was fulfilled. She had achieved something monumental, the power of individual growth intertwined with collective hope. Now, as she moved forward, she could feel a new confidence blooming within her. It wasn't about proving herself through vindication, but embodying the very message she sought to spread. She was a testament to personal overcoming, and as she gazed into the eyes of her classmates, she knew they would conquer together. Before the wave of support washed over her, Alice took a moment, heart racing with gratitude and determination. This was just the beginning. The tapestry of change was woven into the very fabric of their narratives. Now, to you, the audience. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support by leaving a like now to feed the algorithm.
Comment below your reactions and theories about Alice's journey and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Your commitment to personal overcoming stories makes a difference.